The Philadelphia Eagles are entering year 4 of the Nick Sirianni era, one that's been largely successful up to this point, making the playoffs in all 3 years that he's been the team's head coach, including being just 1 year removed from a Super Bowl appearance. His Eagles have won 67% of their games since he's been the team's head coach, including winning 74% of their games over the last 2 years combined. But after a disastrous collapse in 2023, where are the Philadelphia Eagles headed in 2024? And more importantly for us fantasy football players, how does that all translate to the fantasy football field? And how should we approach the Philadelphia Eagles in our 2024 fantasy football leagues? Let's talk about it all right here, right now, in episode 20 of Inside the 20 by Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. Great as Nick Sirianni's Eagles have been on the real football field, especially during the regular season, they've been just as good, if not better, on the fantasy football field over the last 3 years under Nick Sirianni. Now, their first season wasn't anything particularly special. It wasn't anything to write home about in 2021. It was Nick Sirianni's first year with the team. It was Jalen Hurts' first year as the team's starting quarterback, and the Eagles were fine. Okay, they were okay. They finished 12th in scoring and 14th in offensive yards. But over the last 2 seasons, now we're talking. The Eagles' offense has really taken flight. Get it? Because the Eagles taking flight? No? Okay. Well, over the last 2 seasons, they've been particularly dominant. They have finished 3rd and 7th in scoring in the NFL and 3rd and 8th in offensive yards. Nick Sirianni's Eagles are especially dominant, if not all around elite, in the running game in particular. They offer plenty of volume, plenty of yardage, plenty of efficiency, plenty of scoring opportunities. In each of the 3 seasons that Nick Sirianni has been the team's head coach, his Philadelphia Eagles have finished top 6 in rushing attempts in all 3 years, top 8 in rushing yards in all 3 years, and top 5 in rushing touchdowns in all 3 seasons that he's been the team's head coach, including leading the entire NFL in rushing touchdowns in 2 of the last 3 years. So we know exactly what Nick Sirianni and the Philadelphia Eagles want to do with the ball. Now, while the Eagles are elite in the running game, that's not to downplay how effective they can be in the passing attack as well. Now, we already know there's not a lot of volume to go around. The Eagles have never, ever finished higher than 21st in the NFL in passing attempts since Nick Sirianni's been the coach for 3 years. But from a passing yardage and a passing touchdown standpoint, the Eagles are at absolute worst mediocre or slightly above average. Over the last 2 years, they finished 9th and 16th in passing yards and 14th and 16th in passing touchdowns. So while they're dominating the NFL with their rushing attack, their passing game isn't all that bad either. Now, the elephant in the room when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles is their disastrous collapse in the end of the 2023 season, where they lost 6 of their last 7 games, including losing the wild card game to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their offense went insanely stale down the stretch, and Nick Sirianni himself said so. And as a result, the Eagles are now welcoming their 3rd offensive coordinator in as many seasons, bringing in 35-year-old Kellen Moore, a former NFL quarterback who already has a half-decade of offensive coordinator experience. He spent 4 years with the division rival Dallas Cowboys and 1 year last year with the LA Chargers. Now, it is worth noting that Kellen Moore is coming off the worst statistical year of his career as an offensive coordinator, and we'll get to that in a minute, but overall, over the larger body of work that is his NFL offensive coordinator resume, he's been mostly successful, if not elite, as an offensive coordinator. He's garnered head coaching interviews in the last few seasons, including, ironically, in 2021 with the Philadelphia Eagles, who ultimately chose Nick Sirianni. So the question is, and this is a big question, what does Kellen Moore's insertion as the team's offensive coordinator, what does that mean for 2024 fantasy football? Are you a software wizard? A code ninja? A Forgemaster? Or maybe even just a mad scientist? Then come build your career ladder with Infinity Labs, an award-winning technology company, best place to work, and business of the year with best-in-class benefits and compensation. Visit i-labs.tech. That's i-labs.tech today, where you can learn more about Infinity Labs, our expanding national presence, and why the status quo has no hold on us. Now, make no mistake, Kellen Moore's offenses during his time with the Dallas Cowboys between 2019 and 2022, those offenses were absolutely elite, both on the real football field and on the fantasy football field. They finished 6th or better in scoring in 3 of the 4 years, including leading the entire NFL in scoring in 2021, and they finished 14th or better in offensive yards in all 4 seasons that he was the Cowboys offensive coordinator, including leading the league in offensive yards in both 2019 and 2021. And the one season that was just a little bit bumpy as the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys was 2020, when MVP candidate quarterback Dak Prescott only played in 5 games that season. And yet still, Kellen Moore's offense, which was led by Andy Dalton at the time, still finished 17th in scoring and 14th in offensive yards. What should be music to the ears of Eagles fans and fantasy football players alike is the fact that Kellen Moore's elite offenses were both successful in the passing game and the running game while he was with the Dallas Cowboys. His teams finished 15th or higher in rushing attempts in all 4 seasons that he was the offensive coordinator. They finished 9th or better in rushing yards in 3 of those 4 seasons. They finished 7th or better in rushing touchdowns in 2 of those 4 seasons. And in the passing game, they finished 10th or higher in passing attempts in 3 of 4 seasons. They finished 14th or better in passing yards in all 4 seasons, including finishing 2nd in 2 of them. And they finished 9th or better in passing touchdowns in 3 of the 4 years that he was the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Just routinely finishing in the top half of the NFL in every fantasy relevant category. And the best part is, all of that team success showed up at the individual level as well. Dak Prescott was fantasy's QB 7 or better in the 2 full seasons that he played with Kellen Moore, including finishing as fantasy's QB 2 back in 2019. In fact, Dak was averaging an absurd MVP caliber 27.1 fantasy points per game over 5 contests in 2020 before he went down with a season-ending injury. 27.1 fantasy points per game. I know this episode is about the Eagles, and Eagles fans aren't going to like hearing this, but I just have to say it again, like I did in episode 19 of Inside the 20. It is only a matter of time before Dak Prescott is squarely in the MVP conversation. He should have much better odds of winning the MVP award than he does this season, where he has the 11th best odds of winning MVP. It's just a matter of time, but I digress. Anyways, point is, Dak Prescott under Kellen Moore had some terrific games and terrific seasons. Eagles fans, fantasy football managers who roster Jalen Hurts, everybody should be excited about what Kellen Moore can do for Jalen Hurts in 2024 fantasy football. And then you have the running back position, where Ezekiel Elliott finished as fantasy's RB22 or better in all 4 seasons that he played under Kellen Moore, including, by the way, top 9 finishes in 3 of the 4 seasons that the two worked together. And the one season that Zeke didn't finish top 9, that he finished RB22, that was back in 2022, where Tony Pollard finished as fantasy's RB8, essentially kicking Ezekiel Elliott out the door and sending him over to New England. And when Tony Pollard finished RB8, that was just 1 year after finishing as fantasy's RB28, during the same season that Ezekiel Elliott was finishing as a top 9 running back in fantasy football. Plenty of success at the quarterback level under Kellen Moore, plenty of success at the running back level under Kellen Moore, plenty of success at the wide receiver level. Amari Cooper finished as fantasy's wide receiver 10 in 2019, wide receiver 15 in 2020, even without Dak Prescott, and wide receiver 27 in his final season with the Cowboys in 2022, paving the way for a CeeDee Lamb takeover. And a CeeDee Lamb takeover is exactly what happened. Lamb finished as fantasy's wide receiver 24 in 2020 as a rookie without Dak Prescott. He was wide receiver 19 in 2021, and he was wide receiver 5 in 2022. The next wide receiver in the Cowboys depth chart was Michael Gallup. He finished as fantasy's wide receiver 22 in 2019 and fantasy's wide receiver 38 in 2020. You also have Randall Cobb, who was fantasy's wide receiver 44 in 2019. You have Cedric Wilson, who was fantasy's wide receiver 45 in 2021. Point being, Kellen Moore's offenses supported 3 fantasy-relevant wide receivers in multiple years and fantasy relevant tight end. We saw a 37-year-old Jason Witten finish as fantasy's number 11 tight end in 2019, and that was before Dalton Schultz came in. He finished as fantasy's number 11 tight end in 2020, the number 3 tight end in 2021, and the number 9 tight end in 2022, which was Kellen Moore's last year with the Cowboys. Absolutely elite. And a fantasy football goldmine. Elite at the team level, elite at the individual level, where multiple players in multiple seasons produced fantasy-relevant gold. Of course, it's not all sugar, unicorns, and rainbows for Kellen Moore's resume as an offensive coordinator. There's some dark spots on the resume as well. Growing up, one of my favorite things to do was play Madden on my PlayStation, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. And when I say play Madden, what I really mean is simulate the games and simulate the seasons, because my favorite part was managing the team, scouting prospects, doing the draft, making trades, signing free agents, and everything that goes into managing a football team and leading a franchise to glory, building it from the ground up. And if that's your type of deal, if you love that sort of thing, you're going to absolutely love GM Dynasty, which is a simulated football game that I recently started playing and instantly fell in love with. With realistic game planning mechanics and immersive features, GM Dynasty puts you in the hot seat of sports management. And it's not just a game. It's a simulation of the real deal. I invite you to get your free team and compete in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's upcoming tournament, where there's going to be prizes for whoever wins the thing. Register your account on gmdynasty.com, and when you do, join the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football contest using the link that we left for you in the show notes. Elite as Kellen Moore's time with the Dallas Cowboys was, it's not fair or smart for us to just ignore 2023. And 2023 was not pretty for Kellen Moore. It was his only season as the offensive coordinator for the LA Chargers, and his offense finished 21st in scoring and 18th in offensive yards. It was especially nauseating in the running game, where they finished 24th in rushing attempts, 25th in rushing yards, and 20th in rushing touchdowns. That said, it must be noted that the entire Chargers 2023 campaign, not just Kellen Moore's portion of it, the entire campaign from the Chargers in 2023 was a joke. It was a circus. It was a bit of a lost cause. Franchise quarterback Justin Herbert missed the last 4 games of the season. Their RB1, Austin Eckler, picked up an ankle injury in week 1. He missed the next 3 games, and he was very obviously not the same running back even when he did return after a 3-game absence. In fact, Austin Eckler's not even on the team anymore. He's with the Washington Commanders. I've already talked about what to expect from that fit and what to expect from Austin Eckler in 2024 fantasy football. That's in episode 9 of Inside the 20. And then you had the Chargers wide receiver 2, Mike Williams, who didn't even make it past week 3, missing the final 14 games of the 2023 season. Eventually, head coach Brandon Staley was fired during the season after a pathetic 63-21 loss to Aiden O'Connell and the division rival Las Vegas Raiders in front of the entire country on Thursday Night Football. It just was not a good environment for anybody to thrive in, and it's at least worth noting for Kellen Moore, especially when you're considering there's a lot more good than bad on Kellen Moore's resume as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. We shouldn't let 2023 erase the eliteness that were the 4 years prior to 2023. So moving forward, in 2024 with the Philadelphia Eagles, not that there's any awards for most improved offensive coordinator or comeback offensive coordinator of the year or anything like that, but if there was, Kellen Moore would be a great bit to win it in 2024. As opposed to entering a tumultuous environment where the head coach is already on the hot seat, like 2023 with Brandon Staley and the LA Chargers, Kellen Moore is entering an already successful Philadelphia Eagles environment, a team that's won 74% of their games in the last 2 years, and they're just 1 year removed from a Super Bowl appearance. It's a much better environment for somebody to thrive in. Likewise, Vegas sportsbooks are expecting the Eagles to bounce back in 2024. Their over-under is set at 10.5 wins, where there's minus 115 on the over and minus 115 on the under. They have minus 210 odds of making the playoffs. They're tied with the Cowboys for the best odds of winning the NFC East. They have the fourth best odds of representing the NFC in the Super Bowl, and they're tied with the Cincinnati Bengals for the fifth best odds of winning the whole dang thing. And more importantly, at the individual level, which is where we focus on fantasy football, you have Jalen Hurts, who has the sixth best odds of winning MVP. You have new running back Saquon Barkley, who has the third best odds of leading the NFL in rushing yards, and tied for the 11th best odds of winning Offensive Player of the Year. You have A.J. Brown, who has the fourth best odds of leading the NFL in receiving yards, and the 19th best odds of winning Offensive Player of the Year. You have DeVonta Smith, who's tied for the 11th best odds of leading the NFL in receiving yards. So Vegas sportsbooks are expecting great success, per Borat, from the Philadelphia Eagles as a team in 2024, and as an at the individual level in 2024 as well, which is great news for fantasy football. So, with the usual crew returning, right, with Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, Brown, DeVonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, with all of those guys coming back, and improvements at offensive coordinator with Kellen Moore, improvements at running back with Saquon Barkley, we can expect the Eagles to be one of the very best offenses in the NFL in 2024. They're absolutely a team that you would like to have in your fantasy football lineups in 2024. The question is whether or not the individuals on the Philadelphia Eagles are worth their cost in 2024 fantasy football drafts. A.J. Brown goes in the first round, Saquon Barkley goes in the second round, DeVonta Smith goes in the third round, and Jalen Hurts goes in the fourth round. Are they worth it at those costs when compared to the other players available in their ranges? The answers to those questions are inside of Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 Draft Guide is a resource that BBFF subscribers are using to dominate their drafts and get ahead of their league mates before that first football is even kicked in week 1. It contains 300 players, and it's complete with rankings that are going to help with tough decisions, tiers that help you plan for future draft picks, 2024 analysis and previews for all 300 players, stoplights that suggest the perfect time to draft a player, wait for a player, or reach for a player that you absolutely must have on your roster, and an ADP tracker that shows you which direction a player is trending in real drafts over the last several weeks. The draft guide is built and maintained with 30 plus hours of weekly research and over 300 real drafts done by yours truly. It's like you're walking into your fantasy draft having done 300 of your own to prepare. It's $14.99 per year, and you can find it using the link that we left for you in the show notes. That's all for today. Come back every Tuesday and Friday for more league-wrecking fantasy football analysis. I will see you on the fantasy football field, and I hope to see you in the basement. BBFF's online community and Discord server that's filled with sharp fantasy football brains and NFL fans that are dedicated to helping each other outsmart their friends, dominate their leagues, cash in on NFL bets, and take down DFS contests. You can join us while the cost is less than 1 beer per month using the link that we left for you in the show notes. Cheers! This brew's for you.